what up, good people? I checked my website and my other stash to see if I had actually did a full video or talk on the righteousness under pressure. I realized I mentioned that the other day in my talk about Suzette and heart checks and all of the things. So I want to talk about it. I feel like I probably briefed over it in another conversation that I did on the live. I just don't know exactly which one it is. So I'm going to just talk about it in this live. All right. So righteousness under pressure. When that came to me, it was actually observing Joseph's life when this was before he ended up working for, wait, is it Joseph? It was Joseph. But this was before he ended up going to jail. And the wife of the person that he was working under was basically trying to throw herself at him. And so he continued to do things to remove himself from the situation, but to also not be, to not ruin the loyalty that he had with Pharaoh. And so Pharaoh had given him access to everything, of course, but his wife. Knew that having a relationship with would also look down upon, that was something he continued to remove himself from. And so eventually when the woman, gotta love, the woman eventually cornered him and was able to remove his garment from him. And because she was able to remove the garment from him in his route to remove himself from the situation, that ended up being what she utilized to have him then thrown into jail. And so I thought that it was very interesting that even in knowing that he did absolutely nothing to deserve the punishment that he received, he still remained righteous in all of it. And he remained righteous so much so that even while he was in prison, he was favored in prison. And so while he was in prison, he also ended up being over the other inmates because of the favor that was on his life. And so for me, that was really profound, because there are going to be times in life where you're up under pressure for whatever reason, whether it's somebody just acting out towards you because of jealousy or envy, whether it is a lot of things you might have to do in your whatever activities you get into, right? Work, family, all of the things can sometimes invite or open up doors for there to be pressure in our lives, right? And of course, because there are just individuals who refuse to do the work, so their spirits, whichever ones they may be harboring, are going to attack you, especially if you are working on yourself and trying to be better, right? There are spirits within people that just love to attack others for whatever reason, even when they're minding their business. They have to have something to say, right? And so it was very interesting to see that Joseph remained righteous even under pressure. And so because of his righteousness, he remained favored regardless of the situation that he was in. It was also very interesting to me that there were guards that ended up in the jail as well. They got thrown in jail. Joseph was able to interpret their dream. And then because he was able to interpret the dream and the dream came to fruition, came to pass, the one guard who actually lived, I'm going through some pretty scenery right now, so it might happen again, it might not. Like I was saying, that Joseph's name ended up being brought up, same guard later on, right? So he was not able to get out of prison immediately. It still ended up taking some time, right? And so eventually his name got brought up in front of Pharaoh and he was released from prison. Now, mind you, one of the biggest things I took away from this is that Joseph could have complained about being in jail. He could have took his case and fought the case and did all of these different things, right? But he remained righteous despite where he was at, right? And to me, that had to be just his security in who he was and who God was and is in his life, right? Because can you imagine being done wrong, knowing that everything that's been done against you is a lie, and you still have peace and security that despite the situation that you're still going to show up as your best self, right? Not as this individual who just feels like they have to do all of this extra stuff to be heard, to be seen, just because, right? Joseph remained righteous under pressure, and God still favored him despite where he was at. A lot of times we go through these different situations, and instead of remaining righteous, we become everything else but, right? We do all of these extra things, and most times the extra things are not called for. They're really not. Like, however you map it out, it doesn't matter. Most times they're not called for. In
a quarter mile, turn right onto US
absolutely
19 East South.
Excuse me, y'all, my navigation was talking. In most situations, they're not called for. In some situations, absolutely, they are called for. However, typically they're not. Like, you can say what you got to say and go on about your business and let it be that. But regardless,
take the second right onto US 19 East South.
Navigation going, y'all. Regardless, oh, look at there. I wonder who that is. Now I need to look up that person. That's interesting. I like how you did that, guy. But Joseph had to be secure in himself and who God was for him and to him, right? Because he didn't switch up who he was. He went with the flow of the situation. And because he flowed with the situation, despite it not being favorable for him, right? He was blessed exponentially despite the trouble he had to go through at first, right? Despite being lied on, despite being wrongfully thrown in prison, he still remained secure in who he was and in the God that he served. And even in that trouble, he was favored. And oftentimes we don't choose to remain righteous under pressure. Like, just a few minutes ago, I was in a place minding my business, and somebody with their spirit, I ain't gonna call out what they look like.
Continue on US 19 East South for 17 miles.
It's the pattern. But either way, it's just like people's spirits have to always say something. They always got something to say. And despite what they say, it shouldn't change the security in who you are and who God is in your life. And so there are going to come times, because the world is going to get worse, that we have to remain righteous under pressure. That does not mean that we cannot take action. It means that the action that we're called to take, we'll know when we're supposed to take it. Sometimes you don't even have to say nothing, and God is still going to show up and show out on your behalf, just as we see with the story of Joseph. You don't see him saying too much about being wrongfully thrown into jail. He didn't say nothing. He knew the wife lied, but he just took the sentence that he had. And even in the end of it, God brought I know people who don't do nothing. They have an assumption about certain things. They might have bits and pieces about things that took place in my past, but they, at the end of the day, when you know who you serve, at the end of the day, when you know who you serve, you have to become somebody else. You just stand in everything, like all of that, to get back stuff. I mean, you can put energy into that if that's what you choose. That's your business. But everything is energy. So it's always interesting to me to see people who will remain in a situation. And I'm not talking about truly situations that are tough, right? I'm not talking about like certain relationships where there's DV or abuse or different things like that. But I'm talking about situations where while people are benefiting, they're quiet. They don't have nothing to say. Like, absolutely nothing to say. But when they stop benefiting, they have all of these things to bring up, right? They got a whole list of things that they can talk about for years. But when they were in the midst of that thing, they had nothing to say. And that's exactly how it is with my situation. When I was dealing with people, they ain't have nothing to say. There was nothing said. But as soon as I removed myself and they weren't benefiting from me, oh, now they got all these stories to say. That's exactly what goes on sometimes when we seeing all this drama or these exposures coming out. People didn't have nothing to say when they were benefiting. But now that they're not benefiting, this, oh, let me expose this, let me say that. And for what? If you were silent while you were benefiting, and now that you're not benefiting, it's, oh, let me scream to the mountaintops. But you didn't have nothing to say when you were benefiting from the situation. And that's a lot of times what happens, right? The woman the wife who was trying to get Joseph into this crazy situation that would benefit her, she probably would have had nothing to say if Joseph would have actually agreed to do the craziness that she was wanting him to do, right? She would have had nothing to say. But because Joseph did not agree, or that Joseph did not bow to what she was trying to get him to agree to, she had everything to say to entrap Joseph. She had everything, all types of receipts, even if the receipts was just the appearance of a receipt, right? She had the appearance that he did something because she had his coat. Can you imagine somebody having the appearance of an issue and it's just your garment, but you did absolutely nothing? That's how the enemy works, right? That's how these wicked people work. If they'll have an appearance of something and it's really nothing, it's just enough to secure the lie that they have to tell about you. And if you're the type of person that feeds on the top of mess, you'll miss everything else because it's just the appearance of information that's grounded enough to be like, this is what this is. And it's absolutely not that. That's why it's important to remain righteous under pressure. Because it's easy to look at a situation, especially when it's a speck of something, that, oh, that makes sense, that it gotta be that, and it don't be that at all. It don't be that at all. But that's the world we live in today, right? Everybody want proof. Could you imagine being Pharaoh and your wife is telling you that Joseph tried? An interesting area. I'm going through the mountains, so my service. However, as a man, if someone brought evidence of another man's clothing piece and your wife is telling you that this person did XYZ, you're going to naturally want to protect and defend your wife, right? You're not going to question whether or not your wife was lying, even if she was lying. And that's how a lot of people back in the day got killed, right? Because women would go make up these stories and they weren't true at all. And now we got somebody's brother, husband, cousin pinned to trees that they should have never been pinned to because of somebody's fake tears. Even with Jesus, the people were crying out against him. Crying out against him. They could have put a real criminal or Jesus in jail, and instead they put Jesus on the cross and allowed the criminal to go free. Ain't that crazy? Ain't that crazy? Y'all, we don't see that throughout the world today. It's amazing how you can sit and listen to someone who has blatantly lied. There's evidence, full evidence, because shoot, they were the main ones saying, where's the proof? And then when you bring proof, they have their own proof of their own lies. You still sit up under them and listen to them. But you wanted the proof, right? Or you only wanted the proof for the person that was speaking the truth. But you still want to believe the person that's already told you a lie, an extravagant lie. So, staying righteous under pressure is tough, right? It's hard being amongst people who constantly have something to say just because your presence is disturbing them, right? But as individuals, when you are secure in your essence, in your being, in the being that you serve, you worship, righteousness under pressure eventually should get a little bit easier, right? It's not easy to do, but it should become easier. So I just wanted to share that. It was something that I was like, I didn't even do a talk just on that. I think I could probably mix it in somewhere else. I'm not 100% sure, but I remember talking about Joseph and something else. So that's what I wanted to come chit chat about. Hopefully y'all day is going great and amazing, and that you continue to show up and be righteous despite the pressure that you're being put up under, or despite the evidence that may be brought against you, whether you know it's a lie or not. You just remain righteous under pressure, and God will deal with everything else. God will still favor you, even in the situations that don't seem so favorable, right? Just as he did with Joseph. Joseph was in jail, but God still favored him. So much so to where he was basically still getting practice for the position that God was about to elevate him to when he finished that whole ordeal. Don't you love God? Like, Joseph was in essence in practice for the position that he was about to take. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. So, yesterday, thank you, God. Yesterday, I was driving around, and what dropped on me was not getting stuck in the wrong position, right? It was don't get stuck in the wrong position. But now that God has flowed me into this segment of this conversation, right? Because at first I was talking about righteousness under pressure, but now we're going to still use Joseph in this same scenario, and we're going to talk about don't get stuck in the wrong position, okay? And so had Joseph been the type of person who was complaining, who was focused on the fact that he was in prison, right? He would have been stuck in that position. He would have been stuck in that position because that's where his focus was. His focus was on just being righteous, right? But had his focus been on, oh my gosh, they saying this, they saying that, I know it's a lie, blah 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 blah. I gotta defend myself, right? I gotta speak up for myself, and I gotta tell my truth. I gotta tell my side of the story. And eventually you can definitely tell your side of the story. I'm sure down the line when Joseph finally met up with his brothers, maybe that was something that was brought up in conversation. We don't know. The Bible don't speak on it, right? We don't know, but we can only imagine, right? All of the things that Joseph could have later shared with his brothers that he went through just to end up in the position that he ended up in. But had he got stuck on being in jail, and on being in jail falsely, right? On being wrongly accused, he probably would have missed or diverted the favor that was on his life because of who he was in Christ, right? But see, even in the midst of him being in jail, God was putting him in position to get practice for the position that he was going to elevate him to. Joseph was basically second in command in prison. He was second in command in prison. They had him over the people in prison. And when he got out of prison, where was he elevated to? Being over the people under Pharaoh. He was over the people under Pharaoh. The same position, the same job that he had while he was in prison became transferable skills for his new position under Pharaoh. Excuse me. His position in jail, the skills he learned, right, were transferable to the position God elevated him to once he got released from jail. Woo, God is good. We can't get stuck in our current position. And so many of us will look at the position that we're in. Oh, this is wrong. Oh, this shouldn't have happened. Oh, rah, 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 blah, blah, blah. All of this stuff. And sometimes we get so fixated on we have to be the one to fight our battle. We have to do this. We have to do that. And there's a difference between fighting our battles and speaking up for ourselves. The difference, right, is you can speak up and say, this wasn't true. Or, that's me trying to fight my battle.